the eighth continent. Tonight I'm going to share how I first encountered the eighth continent, what it's like to explore the eighth continent, and how you can find entrances to the eighth continent a 2-hour drive away from this very theater. The story starts in a small town not too far from the Montana-Wyoming border. Every summer I go out there to dig up dinosaurs with the Bighorn Basin Paleontological Institute, and one summer I met a man named Ralph Johnson. After a long day of excavating, we sat in the cabin and Ralph told me about the day that he almost died. The first time I learned about the eighth continent was through Ralph's words. The eighth continent is everything beneath the Earth's surface, otherwise known to most people as the world of caves and caverns. There are holes that lead to miles and miles of natural tunnels. Ralph spoke about a cave that he had renamed Godzilla. Him and 4 friends went to Godzilla, and they checked the weather. There was chances of a thunderstorm that night, but they were going to be out anyways, so they decided to go ahead. They go into the cave, they go through a 60-foot crawlway, and spend around 10 hours underground exploring, and on their way out, everything changed. What had been a small stream transformed into a chocolate brown flowing river. And as they went through the crawlway, they only had enough room to keep their heads above water. And the water kept rising. The cave was going to sump. The cave did sump. They were soaking wet, cold, and nearly hypothermic. They took off their clothes, wrung them out. They put on garbage bags to stay warm and took out a tarp and stood there and just waited. The good news is that they had someone on the outside, Carolyn. If by tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. she didn't hear from them, she would call the National Cave Rescue Commission. They knew that it was up to them to stay alive for at least 12 more hours. Every hour, they would go and check to see if the water level had lowered. And after a few hours in the early morning, Carl went to check, and he came back and he said, "Guys, this isn't caving 101, but I think we can make it." They made it into a room, and what was an easy 10-foot down climb had turned into a waterfall. They couldn't make it out, so they set up the tarp again. Eventually, they noticed they could see the entrance, but they couldn't reach it. What Kevin decided to do, one of the team members, is he was like, "I'm going to try to climb this risky waterfall." And miraculously, he got out. When he walked up to the car to get rope, he encountered the National Cave Rescue Commission, and all 5 members of that party made it out of that cave alive that day. Immediately after hearing that story, I turned to Ralph and I said, "Ralph, when is the next trip and can I go?" My very first trip was in a cave in the state of West Virginia. After 8 hours underground, I emerged and I looked at Ralph and I said, "I want to do this again every day for the next 10 days. And that day, I was reborn as a caver. Being underground kind of feels like living out chapters in a book. On my first trip, the first room we went into was bone dry, almost dusty, and we saw 2 bats. As we entered the second room, it was only about 1 foot high and 3 feet wide, and I had to belly crawl through it. And the third room that we entered kind of felt like I was walking through a troll's nose. Eventually, we saw the light, and one by one, we walked out of this tiny hole into the most saturated sunset I had ever encountered. As a caver, I am often one of a handful of people that have been to that very spot on the planet. And if I'm lucky, I'm the first one. It kind of feels like maybe what Neil Armstrong felt when he first stepped foot on the moon. If you drive 2 hours east of here, there are about 12 cave entrances. And if you drive 5 hours south of here, there are about 300 cave entrances. And if you want to go, the Seattle Caving Club does beginners trips. And if you go to cascadegrotto.org/ignite, you can sign up to come with us. In my opinion, the best way to know if you like something is to try it and decide for yourself. If you think caving's something that you might like, there are over 10,000 cavers across the United States are ready and willing to introduce you to a network underground that's unknown by most humans. I hope to see some of you underground, and until then, cave softly.